Hello, good afternoon. How are we all getting on? I am delighted to be hosting the next session, and it's called Lyfe Wi Fyfe. And my guest is, you know what? Ashley Douglas is a multilingual researcher, screiver, and Irish setter, a woman o' many talents, an alumni of the University of St Andrews, when she's nae busy working and reporting at the proceedings of the Scots Parliament. She's busy working with a wheen o' leads and can speak Danish, German, as well as her mother tongue of Scots and English. Ashley herself was nominated as Media Person of the Year in the 2019 Scots Language Awards, and she manages to squeeze in a hale load of Irish setting work and has previously been an Irish setter on a letter shading project between the Basque screiver Iban Daldua and her ain James Robertson. In 2019, she contributed to the National Library of Scotland's Wee Windies project, which won the Scots Project of the Year in the 2020 Scots Language Awards. But that was then, and this is new, and I'm fair ticket to be joined by Ashley to hear blether about all the projects that she's been involved with over the last 12 months. Hello, Ashley, how are you getting on?
Oh, yeah, no bad yourself.
Good, yeah. We've had a lovely afternoon, loads of stuff going on. But this is the first and last live interview that we're doing the day. I must say that after this, we will be coming to an end. Unfortunately, Stuart Patterson will no longer be able to do his Patter with Patterson the day, but it'll be rescheduled to another day. So Ashley, you're just doing ahin. Like you're ahwai, you're on Twitter, you're doing a full-time job, and then you're doing freelance stuff on the side. You're an integral part to the community of practice that is the Scots language scene. First things first, what we've seen you, well, let's just get to it. Firefox. This is really exciting. This is a muckle win for the leads, and it's incredible that you can download a browser and stravig the internet in Scots. A hard question first. Why do you think it's important for folk to be able to stravig the internet in Scots? I'm playing deals advocate here.
Aye, no bother at all. We all ken we mun be used to the deals advocate questions when we're up pod in Scots. I'm seeker you're used to that yourself as well. Say it's just about normalising Scots, is it no? And I think that's what those of us in the Scots lead community are hating to make the point of, because we hate to go on about it all the time. I think folk can get the impression that we're trying to make out that Scots is special or something. And it's like, no, we're just looking for equality. It's the same as with feminism, really, isn't it? It's like some Egypts get in their head that women are seeking some sort of special treatment. It's like, no, we just would quite like some equality, Ken. Same with gay rights. We'll probably come on to that later as well when we're speaking about some of the other stuff I did for the library with LGBT History Month. But I've stravagued away on a tangent already. But anyway, it's just about normalisation and equality for Scots. I didn't ken who money lead you can stravague the internet in hunters. German, French, Danish, you name it. So it's just like, why no Scots and all? Because it's just another modern living lead, and Scots speakers should be able to use it on the internet as well as anywhere else.
Absolutely, that was a wonderful response. I'm not going to lie. So who did it come about? Because of course you worked with the company Rubric. Who did that? How did you establish that relationship? And between us, full land did it tack?
Well, aye. So it was myself and my good pal Thomas Clark, who you ken and all. And the last thing we worked on together actually, well, I mean, we've done the fairy tales and that as well, but the last thing we did, just me and Thomas together, was the Declaration of Arbroath. So a sort of modern Scots ever set in the 14th century Latin letter to the Pope. So this was like a other thing for us to work on for sort of medieval Scots stuff to Scots for the modern world, for the internet. And we got emailed for Rubrics. They're an Edinburgh-based hour setting company, and they have previously worked with putting Firefox into other like more minority languages, as I understand it. And because they're just based in Scotland and obviously have a stake in like Scotland's culture and all, they wanted to put it into Scots, and we were only too happy to help them out as the hour setters on that. And it was just smashing to do as a team, though I didn't think that's a job you would have wanted to do on your own as an hour setter, just because so much of it was, I mean, no just hour setting. We had to create, in many cases, words in Scots that didn't currently exist. So it was to create an hour setting project is no really to capture a lot of what was going on. So I'm awfully glad we had each other to bounce ideas off, and sometimes we'd spend a whole day just discussing like the hour setting one word.
That's what I was thinking. So this computer lingo is a pretty new thing to begin with. I mean, like 50 years ago, we weren't using iPads or whatever. We just didn't hate it. So in order to invent this new kind of, not a new language, but a new lexical, taking words and making them into different things, like stravaig. I would have never thought that that would be browse. I would have thought stravaig was gan for a wee donder, here we check about, like we swatch about. Using these all words and putting them and repurposing them. I think, yeah, the word I'm looking for is repurposing words. Yeah. How, so you just said one word would take a whole afternoon. Stravaig's one of them, but Laupit is not Laupit.
The one we were just speaking about.
The one we were just speaking about. Kind of, my goodness, I'm just having to go skipped. Laupit. To skip out a file.
Our Laupit, aye. So we were setting like kind of if you're downloading a wee of files, but you maybe wanted to skip some of them. So we were going, how can you do that in Scots? I mean, you could just say skip it and put the IT ending with the Scots. You could just stick with the English, but that'd be a bit boring. I mean, in many cases, the Scots word and the English word are the same. They're closely related languages. You can't always hear a word that's no shared with English, but wherever we could, if there was a better way to do it in Scots, we would. So that was one of the examples where we were like, can we, that's the sort of thing you'd sit and think about. There's no like one correct answer. It was quite a creative project. It's quite innovative. So we'd sit and go, how can we do this? So yeah, the word lout already exists in Scots. To jump, obviously kens that. Our lout, to jump over, that's a wee bit more innovative to use it like that. And then to put it in that specific internet context, our louping files in a download. So that, yeah, that's a good example of the sort of things we'd have discussions back and forth over. And most of the time our concern was accessibility, because when you're stravaiging the web, folk need to understand what the command's telling them to do. It's not like if you're screaming poetry or whatever, it can be as wild as you want. Sometimes you don't always understand what a poet's getting at. It can be a bit more creative and esoteric. That really wasn't what we were hearing today here. It was like accessibility and communication first. So we were always weighing up that Scots distinctiveness versus it still being clear what's meant. But I'm sure you'd agree that like on the day we only Scots would see that in context. They'd ken the word loup as the core verb, our is the preposition, file, our loup. I think most folk could get that richt awa.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about, because when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is exciting. And I downloaded it, like the day after or whatever, but I still haven't changed it to my default browser, because I sometimes find that I'm struggling as it is to work the internet and get a in, let alone try to think, oh, well, this is what this means, this is what this means. When you were thinking about accessibility, I'm not sure there's probably a good answer to this, but did you decide to create like a language guide to go along with it? Is that a thing that you
Thing is, I'm no seeker whether that's publicly accessible or not. I ken it's definitely available to the hour setters, because we obviously had to set it. It's that question first of all, like all Scots speakers can understand English, certainly in written form, because it's what we hate it. We hate to do that, and we're used to stravaiging the web and filling in forms and all in English. So the first question then is like, it's not about communication. Like there's no like a communication need for the internet in Scots. So right away, there's other reasons for it. So we had this muckle sort of statement of principles, I guess, to start with, for by a standardisation of who we were spelling past tense, who we were spelling common preposition. So there's this whole document, before we even go into actually translating the sentences, the sort of phrases you'd actually come across in the Stravager. That was like the very end of the road in the Firefox project.
That's really interesting. And I guess, see, we've got more and more folk who are learning Scots solely online. And it's amazing to see, like, we had a lad at the Urvice Camoyu, which is just an event to get folk involved. And he was for Israel, and he was a poet. And he learnt the entirety of, he learnt Scots to the point where he could do a poem and feel comfortable like reciting it all
Yeah.
online. And I think, you know, I'm not for sure, but I think he used the Discord server quite a lot to like
Okay.
get literacy up to standard. That's really cool. But it still makes me feel uncomfortable because I'm constantly worried that folk are going to criticise me. There seems to still be this like all Garda folk that are first to like jump on you if you make a mistake. Because I'm still bad with my like past participles at my present in English, let alone Scots. Sometimes I worry that Scots as a language is braw, but it also feels like what if somebody has got ASN or like they're maybe dyslexic in English? How do we make Scots more accessible to them?
That's a good point, and I'll go back to I said earlier I was glad to do this project with Tamis and almost to like near a human shield, but it was like doing it as a team because as you say, there's still a lot of not wanting to be negative, but you can still come into criticism for things you're doing in Scots that some folk will no like. Obviously, will have an opinion. I mean, that's one reason why I am 100% in favour a Stonner Scots. We had to essentially, we started by creating our own de facto Stonner for Firefox. So like, for example, you'll maybe not like this being a Doric speaker yourself, but for the sort of negative verb endings like Dinnae or canny, willney, we just decided for the cert we're going to do AE endings as like the mere, sorry again to those of you for the northeast, but like just as a mere central belt Stonner sort of Uber Scots were like, let's just go with AE, but we could equally have chosen to go with the just and it would be canna, dinna, whatever. But you hate to make your own decisions and then you just stick with them. And then consistency is important. So I think yeah, for us and just for me as myself as a screever, you just kind of in the absence of a mere universal stoner at the moment, you want just kind of make your own decisions and stick with it. Although, ain that I've been shuckling on recently, and you'll ken this because we screeve in Scots personally too, is how to screeve o, the preposition, like of, the English preposition of. And in Scots, most of the time until now, I've screeved it just o. And I think that's more for literature and you're used to seeing it in the poetry. And if I was screeving something more formal, still like maybe something for the library or in the parliamentary context, I'd probably still use that oh, but in my own colloquial screeving and on Twitter and that, I'm definitely using AE. And I've seen like Len Penny's been doing that too. When I'm screeving with Tamis, we do that. And it's one of the ones, I think most of us, especially in central Scotland, that is how you say it. Like one of them, or it's very A, it's not really O, which is like more formal, but when you screeve it, you screeve O. But that just makes that mere muckle point though. Like it would be good if we had a screeve at Stonard that Obdi adhered to, so you weren't constantly having to weigh up how shall I screeve this, how shall I know? Because like in English, we can all pronounce it however we want, but there is a written standard. Whatever way you pronounce the preposition of, you screeve it O-F and that's it. So
Yeah. I do agree. And I think that like the mayor that I've been doing in Glasgow, the mayor that I'm like Glasgow Jason, and I really didn't oh my god, I really did. I don't mind when folk are doing AE instead of A. Um, but I mean, my fear, and as well as other people's valued fear. What's the word? They're
valid,
real,
valid.
a real, a valid. I was waiting to say Valium. I was like, can he say that? Oh well. But other people's valid fears is that a standard would dilute each regional dialect. I really didn't think that that's. I think. See in the northeast, when we are really, really being lazy, we didn't even use dinner. We just say da. I da
Yeah,
think. I da
definitely.
kin. I actually do think that it will dilute other regional dialects. And we've seen that with Gaelic. You've still got, you can tell a Gaelic speaker's fi Harris or Lewis or Skye or Argyll or the North. You can still tell. I don't think that that's going to be an issue. And Steve Byrne's got a really great, spiel on why it's not going to be an issue. Same with James Pukowski as well. So I'm not worried. I do worry that folk are going to like maybe kind of drift towards centralised Scots in fear of, alienating folk. But at the end of the day, there's mere folk here. Like the populace is bigger in the central belt. So I didn't make I'm nae like after folk for doing that. And I think when we were doing interviews, Janice Forsyth, loads of broadcasters are very, very supportive of Scots. I love it. I love it. But I feel like Finn, when it was on TV and all that, there was, they didn't poke fun, but it was like the Mac Totty and Mac Muckle, you
Mm,
know, I was like, oh, could you get a waff of that? And I guess you would do it, Mac Totty. I would have said Mac Smar, but then Smar is a really awkward word to write. Like
I
smar, smear. People could pronounce it wrong. So that's why I was like, actually, tot is better.
Yeah, I
But
think we
you
did
must
as well. We did think about we, but again, you end up with that WEE apostrophe ER. It
be,
looks really weird. So
yeah.
we wanted to use a Scots word. So you kind of, yeah, you really, this is exactly the sort of thing Thomas and I would sit and go through smart does, but it's when you try to put it into the comparative, it just all gangs of glay. So yeah, totally wheelkind word,
Yeah.
but we're not used to hearing it in mere formal online context. So yeah, you do run the risk. There was a piece in the Sun. You got to be looking as well. Actually, mine because he was like, well, actually, sorry, I should have used the opportunity to ease you up there. By the way,
No.
no, but seriously, the backstory to the Rubric project, as I understand it, is it was your Spotify campaign what put the whole idea in their head. So really, the answer to the question is like your Spotify campaign sparking it. So
Oh,
that's,
well,
but yeah, I was speaking to the Sun journalist, and he did kind of say like he sort of suggested that it might have been sort of humorous, and of course I was like, no, that's not what it's about at all. And if any of these words seem funny to folk or make them want to hear we giggle, I mean, I know Fanco Fixin was also the one that kind of captured folks' imaginations. We used live pups, by the way, for pop-ups as well, so kind of like get rid of live pups again, pure easy to understand what that means in context. But if these words seem humorous or strange in this context, then it's only because Scots has been socially oppressed and into the areas of comedy and colloquialism. So it's about our coming that. So yeah, but those were all this that when we were doing our setting, that is the problem with many Scots words, is because we're no used to seeing Scots in more formal spheres, that a lot of the words are then automatically associated with humour or colloquialisms, but you're trying to then mainstream them in normal. There's nothing inherently funny about Scots. Scots can be used for comedy, but it's not an inherently funny language. And I think that's still a lot, and it's noted in doing Scots comedians at all, like absolutely carry on. But I think we on watch kind that Scots isn't just seen in comedic settings and isn't just seen, for example, if we go into like the theatre sphere, often you'll see the higher up the social classes you go, folk will speak either Stonor English or Scottish Stonor English. The lower classes then speak Scots. You'll see that in Screevit literature and culture as well. Ken Scots is used only for dialogue or only for lower class characters. So it's guy complex, as you will ken when you're working with Scots, and all the things you mon tactento when for choosing just one word that you're going to use in one context.
totally. Absolutely. We've covered that really well. I agree completely what you're saying about the humour. Files, we've got loads of like serious Scots ballads, which are using quite an archaic form of Scots. Like I didn't really hear folk going using the word spack much
Mm.
for up and spack, but in ballad speak that happens all the time because it's a ballad stock phrase. So we've got that really serious Scots song where it's balladry, and then you've got that humorous cornkister, bothy kind of, and then you've got the Scotland the What music hall type of Scots. All of that really reinforces that Scots is humorous. It's funny. It's for a laugh, and it doesn't really help taking Scots seriously as like a modern living lead. And of course, that's why I wanted to do that pop song in Scots, because
Yes.
it shows that it doesn't need to be really serious ballad, and it doesn't need to be really funny, humorous cornkister music hall Scotland the What type song. There
Yeah.
is an in between, and we can have a really serious in between. But I can imagine that you and Thomas spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what was the right thing to do. And I'm sure you probably gid back and you went, oh no, what about this? Because these folk think this and these folk think this. And I do that in my writing all the time, and I'm constantly worried. And then it's only when you take a step back, you're like, actually, who am I trying to please? Like, there's no standard yet, so let's just like create our own standard. And I'm sure that's what folk like Matthew Fitt did when he created Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. And that brings me swimmingly on to the next subject. I am still to get my hands on the follow up Grimm's detail, but I hate this. And Ashley, you were one of the hour setters. You're among. I mean, I'm not trying to ding you doing it all. I'm trying to ding everybody else up and you up. You're among folk like Elaine C. Smith, James Robertson, Val McDermott, Matthew Fitt, and I mean, Abdi on here is amazing. Shane Strachan, Sheena Blackhall, like Susie Briggs. This is a class book. And the next scene that's been out on the 4th of August, just last month, you've also done an hour setting. Is it the Swans and the Good Sister? See, I've never even heard of that, Ian.
I think I maybe ken the Grimm's ones a bit better because my undergrad degree was in Germany and I stayed there for a year and all, and so it's good. And as you mentioned at the start, I speak both Danish and German, so it's been guidebra for me working on both of them when the originals are in leads that I ken as well.
And this book is up for Scots Book of the Year or Children's Book of the Year at the Scots Language Awards this year, I believe. And you can still go and vote until the morn for this book or for whatever you want to vote for. But I think it's great. I think that I was banging on about this, banging on's not enough a good way to put it, but I'm always trying to say that kids hating materials in their own language is really important, because I didn't hate you didn't hate either, but like we both didn't hate all these resources growing up at all. I just had this isn't bad, but I had loads of Ian Middleton books in the house and Sheena Blackhall books and Les Wheeler books. But to like the average bear, that's nae I feel like enticing, if you get what I mean. But to hear these fairy tales, not just for kids, because this is most likely going to be bought by parents who's going to buy this, read it to their kids, and that might make them a wee bit more confident about using Scots to the bairns, because we found in our song traditions that the generation above me was maybe one of the last generations to hear that oral tradition of storytelling and singing to your bairn, and that's going out of fashion, and that new parents didn't have the confidence to, from memory, orally do storytelling and singing. So resources like this can not only be great for kids to have material in their own language and put into libraries and school libraries, but it can also maybe reinvigorate that idea that parents can have confidence in using the mother tongue to speak to their kids, as well as read stories and sing songs to them. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. And I ken that the idea with Ichiku, the bairns publishing company, I hint that was to give bairns and families and just Obdi in Scotland these classics of world literature in Scots. And we're back to that same point again of like it's just normalisation of Scots, that you can read the Grimm's Tales and Hans Christian Andersen and all the other leads in the world you want, so why no Scots as well? And then it is that it's like validating it and giving folk permission, like it's orich to use, more than orich to use these words, like just do it.
Yeah, and I think haying Scots as a skill is really amazing. Over the last year, we've seen that the Scots Language Centre has really put into action an action plan on how to address Scots literacy, and that culminated last week in, I think, Scots Works, where they commissioned 4 or 5 writers to create new works using Scots. And I think I was involved in the initial bit, but they got together and they kind of created a Scots language kind of writing guide, like a style guide. I haven't had the time to look at it because it is huge and it's a massive resource, but also it looked very useful when I did have a look at it. But I did notice that they saw what happened with the Wikipedia, and they wanted to make a project which would help fight with their literacy. And these books are already helping folk with their literacy. But of course, it's the idea of this standard. It's really tricky to get your head around it because I really didn't use fit and far and fa, whatever, and fan. I would use whit and whar and whan just because I've lived in Glasgow that long. Yeah, people change the way that they speak all the time based on who they're like around. So I think that it's cool that all these projects are going on. Like when Simon and I were looking at all the folk that has been speaking the day, we were confused because we're like, there's so many organisations that are actually have the remit of promoting Scots. But I think it's fun, serious, big organisations start to incorporate Scots in their remit. And of course, you've been working with Historic Scotland recently on a project which I have no clue about. So if you could tell me a wee bit of that, that would be cool.
Aye, sure. So that's a great exciting one. So we're just at the start of the new, and it's essentially they're redoing the audio guide at Lithgay Palace. Obviously, quite a men's food place in Scotland where Mary Queen of Scots was born and all. And it's just a bonny palace and all. And but obviously, for most of the palace's history, Scots was the spoken lead, and it was the lead of the kings and queens all the way down to the common folk. So they're really keen to get that across in the audio guides for folk if we visit the palace, and that's for Scots speakers as well as for non-Scots speakers, just so that anybody who visits this Scottish palace will ken that the Scots language is an absolutely central part of its history. You can't really tell its history without gone into Scots language history. Like, for example, the Ain Satire of the Three Estates, like one of your most mensful works of Scots literature, was performed there. A very early version of that was performed there. So yeah, what I'm doing with them is working to incorporate Scots through this audio tour, both in the narration but and in the voices of the characters. So the way the audio guide's going to work is that you're going to hear from folk with Woody Bade at the palace through their voices. So we're still at the guy early stages of it, but Historic Scotland couldn't be more committed to including Scots, and it's just been a total pleasure to work with them so far. So I'm looking forward to the rest of that one.
That's really exciting. And the mere big organisations that get involved with Scots, the mere the status of the language not just solidifies or anything, but is raised. Like, we didn't need somebody to go, aye, it's a language. But hearing all these things going, oh, well, it's a language and we're working with it, really helps to raise the profile of the language, no, the status, the profile of the language. And we've seen that over the past year, we found like Lidl, I don't know how you pronounce it. Lidl is up for Scots Business of the Year. And I know that when folk read that nomination, they go, what's Lidl done? But over Christmas time, they commissioned, what was it, maybe 9 or 10 Scots poets and screevers to write a poem or write a piece of work in Scots. And one of the poems that were created was, of course, by Len, and it was beautifully shot, and it went viral naturally. I mean, she could post that she's eating her breakfast, and it'll go viral. That's really, really good. So I'm excited to see fit the possibilities of Historic Scotland will do, because if it, there's Lithgay Palace is just one of their venues, one of their places that they've got, whatever, there might be more opportunities in the future, and being able to forge the connections is really good. And I'm really glad that you have done that. Back onto some of the other things that you get up to. I just can't believe that you've got a full-time job working in Parliament and you're doing all this overtime. No wonder it's really hard for us to meet up and grab a coffee, because you're really busy. You're also involved in a campaign called the TIE campaign, Kent as Time for Inclusive Education. It has the aim to combat homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying in schools with LGBT inclusive education and materials. This is very important work. And alongside this, you'd be doing a bit of research, or your aim, into 16th century lesbian love poems in Scotland. One of which was the earliest example in Europe in any language or the LGBT community in poetry. And this is firmly solidifying Scots as a formidable lead representing the LGBT community. Tell me a bit more about this and the tie campaign as well.
Right, I'd love to. So this one is, I mean, as we've already kind of covered, I've worked on many really cool stuff, but this one is, I still can't believe it's a thing, to be honest. When I first came across this 16th century love poem, lesbian love poem in Scots, I was just like, if there's gods up there, they've put this one here for me to find. So yeah, I came up on that quite by chance. Ken, when you're just reading stuff and you follow a footnote and then you come to this, and I honestly could hardly believe what I'd stumbled upon. And it's hardly been spoken about in the academic world. Like in the wee sort of Stour covered tours of academia, folk ken what it is, but it's no really real ken. And I'm going, how are we not speaking about this? This is amazing. I mean, it's a whole other discussion as to why it's no celebrated as muckle in academia as it should be. And I think a lot of that gangs back to sort of heteronormativity in academia and in society at large, but it permeates into academia and all, which is when you come across something in history or in literature that looks gay, folk will go out their way to find any other explanation. It's the gal pals thing, Ken. So this is like a super lesbian poem. Like there's no other way to read it. It's highly sexually charged. It's literally one woman screaming to another woman, "I wish I could marry you. What a shame you've got a husband." Like you can't read it any other way. But still, academics over the centuries have kind of gone, well, it was described once as an insipid poem of female friendship. And you're like, you're not reading the same thing as me here, pal. But anyway, I was absolutely chuffed to work with the National Library Scotland. You mentioned the Wee Windies forum earlier, which the National Library big it a few years signed, but it's been added to, which is amazing. So that's like a collection of all just good Scots literature. I think the earliest one, I think Barber's Bruce is the earliest one, which I worked on actually as well. And it's added to all the time. So I fund this and I said, listen, can we do a wee windy about this? And Alice at the National Library, who's won her foot, she was like, absolutely put it out in LGBT History Month appropriately, which was amazing. So that was back in February. That was absolutely wonderful, and it was amazing to see folk really connecting with that as well. And then the ties, so Time for Inclusive Education, like you say, they seen that too. And I'm fortunate enough to ken, so Liam and Jordan, where the twa main men at the heart of that, I'm fortunate enough to ken them as friends as well. So they were like, actually, we're needing to make this into schools resources as well, which is what they do. So we have spent the past months working on schools resources that are then going to introduce bairns positively to both Scots and LGBT history, which for me is just like the best thing ever, because both of these issues, it's funny, Scots language, like minority language stuff, and LGBT minority issues on the one hand can seem quite different, but there's a lot of overlap as well. And one of the things is just that no getting spoken about. At worst you get spoken about badly, but almost just as bad is just no getting spoken about at all. And certainly in education.
And I think that when we look at, our most celebrated poet, Burns, that completely pushes for it this heteronormative, hyper-masculine poetry. I mean, if you look at the Merry Muses, the way that women's position is in that is, I mean, it's pretty disgraceful to say the least. And I think that a lot of it really stands up in the 20th century to be talking about women's, hygiene and the way that they present themselves and preens themselves. So to hear like a lesbian love poem, which is it's nae roch, it's like nae gorse. Like in the traditional song world, there's loads of songs which are just roch. They are just roch. They're party pieces. They're roch. They're no meant for consumption either anywhere else other than at a party for abdy's foo. So to hear some literature that is actually, highlighting LGBT plus history and Scots language at the same time is amazing, and hopefully you can uncover more of it. But yeah, I definitely think that from a look at Burns, especially the Merry Muses, which isn't taught in schools. You understand why. It's not appropriate for schools. But even when you look at his normal stuff, like My Love's Like a Red, Red Rose and A1 Kiss and all that, there's love songs in Scots which can be changed, gender roles can be changed, But when he goes and he names folk and all that, you can't really get a waff of that without taking out verses and chunks. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I have an issue with a lot of Burns stuff and the fact that it is quite hyper masculine, very hyper masculine.
And it's also the historical context of like there's mayor to Scots than Burns, and it's no to ding ding Burns. You know, obviously you can't do Scotland or Scots we out to content to Burns, but there's centuries long tradition afore Burns as well. And I mean this poem's from 1586, so like Mary Queen of Scots is still alive. James VI has just taken over in Scotland. Like, and this is centuries sign. And it's another interesting overlap actually between like Scots activism and LGBT activism is folk that will try to ding down either of these things. You'll have come across this yourself. It's the notion that it's some sort of modern fad, right? So Scots was invented by the SNP a few years ago to boost nationalism, and gender identity or being gay again is just a modern fad. And it's like it's so important therefore when you can point to historical, like gay folk of I've been around, Scots has been around since at least the 1300s, if not before. So what this poem also does for me is through that historical grounding in Sean Bairns in schools, here's a Scots lesbian poem from 1586. It validates and it legitimizes somehow, and it stops folk with bad intentions for ignoring Scots or ignoring LGBT history.
But also, if you know, in schools, in primary school and in secondary school, bairns are going through a formative time for the way that they present themselves and the way that they change, moving up to secondary or moving on to higher education. They're at a really vulnerable time. So to be able to access these materials at that specific point in their lives is really, really important because it will change the way that they perceive themselves and hopefully for the better. So this work seems like just a wee dental work in the whole grand scheme of what you're doing because you do so much, but it's actually a really formidable and important, profound. I think profound is the word. Is there a Scots word for profound? What
Again,
do you
you'd
think?
probably just profound, eh? You'd probably just put your Scots marker on
Yeah.
it. I mean, men's foo, I do use in screeving, ken like foo men's or dignity, but it was actually a point I was going to make earlier as well, is when we were talking about Scots and how it's quite overrepresented in some areas like comedy, but underrepresented in perhaps more serious registers. And I just said that myself there, it's a bit register, isn't it? And I think when we're talking about the notion of Scots as a lead, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like you can use it for comedy, use it for bletherin in your pals on WhatsApp, but you can also use it in the trauma of the Scots Parliament. You can also use it to screeve academic essays about a 16th century poem. And I just think that's what we're needing to get across when that is Scots behaving like a totally normal language. It would undermine the case for Scots as a language if it was only being used in ein or twa these spheres. But Scots, like English, like German, like Danish, is used for all these registered in all these contexts.
Yeah. No, that's super important. And I mean, for the last year or two, you can actually do your Creative Scotland funding applications in Scots. Unfortunately, I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but what I'd like to see is a wee box there saying, does this project have a Scots element? You tick that box and you might get more funding or you might get looked upon more fondly. Because of course right now, you know, if you've got a project which has got a Gaelic element, there's a wee box which says, does it have a Gaelic element? And you tick it and perhaps the application might be not thought of more favourably, but through equality and diversity monitoring, they hate to fund X amount of projects that has Gaelic, and I'd love for that to happen, where Scots is protected in the fact that you can maybe get your funding application looked on more favourably if you're seen to be promoting Scots. But that's a whole other conversation, and we want to get into it because I ken that you can't speak about politics. But there's more. So I'd like to ding back to this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now we have not been able to. I'm not for sure if this has affected the book sales, but not being able to be in the flesh has certainly affected CD sales. But both of these books have been released during a global pandemic, and you can get them for the Itchy Coo You can get it for Amazon. You can get it for water stains, water stains. You can get it away. I'd like to show everybody that's watching a video of you doing the nightingale.
In the soft summer dim, a nightingale sang on the branch o' a tree. Sweet notes tumbled out the toty wee birdie, yin after another, in a sang fu o' surprise. The tree was in a wild wood by the edge of the deep blue sea. Fishermen loused for their work to listen to the birds sing. As they listened, their een smiled, and then they carried on with their work, mair blithe nor they'd been afore. Now the wild wood was just ayont the boundary o' the Emperor o' China's by ordinary porcelain palace, a palace that was fu' wonders and surrounded by bonny gardens. Makers and screevers came fae all over the world and screeve about the wonders they'd seen there. The Emperor was sent the first copy of every book that ever came out. He read ilka ane with delight until ae day he came upon something that tickled him. It says in this book that a bird cried a nightingale is the most precious thing among all my possessions. But I've never even heard of this bird, he thought to himself. The Emperor called the high heedgen of his ministers to him. Who have I never heard of this bird? The Emperor speered. She'll sing in my presence the night, or somebody will ken about it.
Just wondering what other project you hate in the pipeline, because I feel like there's probably more that you're just no telling me.
there is more, aye, but they're unfortunately secret, so I can't get into them yet.
That is fine.
And she's keeps me richt on like what I can and can't speak about. So we look through the contracts before this sort of thing, so that I get ever excited with all the things I'm working on. So I just need to make secret that I didn't start bletherin ever muckle about things that I shouldn't be just yet. But there's definitely more. I can definitely say that I'll be doing more with the library. We're hoping to find more Scots LGBT stuff. So here, if anybody kens o anything, that's maybe not as exciting as like a 16th century lesbian Scots love poem, but if anybody else is coming across stuff in archives or especially historical stuff, like absolutely drop me a message. I ken my wee website details came up earlier, so can fire me a message there or on Twitter. So always looking for new materials for wee windies to showcase good stuff in Scots.
Yeah, that is amazing. And the Wee Windies project feels like a legacy project that's been going on for a few years, but is continually changing and evolving. And they kind of legacy projects are amazing. And I feel like you've been a big part of that, winning Project of the Year last year at the awards. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've spoke about a lot, but I think what we were touching on earlier about Scots and how it's seen by, yeah, I find that Scots, especially ballads, are extremely misogynist. I feel like a lot of the time, women's experiences are tell either in a, okay, I'm going to marry her and we're going to have children, or she's the kind of damsel in distress. And when we've got folk like Violet Jacob, which is, historical poets, nay, that historical, only like the turn of the 20th century, I find that she actually writes from a different opinion. She's in the end of it, she writes about the lived experience of a woman who has experienced an illegitimate childbirth.
Yeah.
In Halloween, she speaks about losing her son in the war. I feel like these poets are the ones that we should be celebrating a wee bit more. I'm not trying to down Burns. I'm not trying to do that, because we all have to love Burns, right?
Well, McDowell already did it. Like, it's like that Dunbar, not Burns. Like, there's a long tradition of Scots screevers and activists gone, there's more to Scots than Burns. So you're just in good company there.
Yeah, but I just feel like Violet Jacobs' poetry, as well as, Marian Angus and Helen Cruikshank and all that, just actually talks about the lived experience of women as opposed to women through the lived experience of men. Do you find that?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's a problem, not just in the Scots world, that's just like the patriarchy with Biden, whatever lead it's in. So I think we're all fecht and that good fecht and all the leads. But especially with Scots, I think, because historically, especially, it can be quite male dominated when you think about the names and and all that. But I definitely think Thon's getting better. Even the fact that we're two women here in this discussion, the new, and then the fairy tales book as well that you cited. I was thinking about this earlier. I think it's about 50-50 with the authors, men and women. So I think Scots these days is actually looking a lot better.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. And when I look at this, when I think of Elaine C. Smith and Val McDermid and yourself and Susie and Sheena Blackhall, it's no just you're there because you're a woman. You're there because you're formidable women in the lead. I feel like there should be some sort of project which celebrates all genders, but especially our women and our trans writers as well, and our non-binary writers, because I know that that's something which is attached itself to Scots poetry over the last couple of years, and it's became really divisive, and it shouldn't be. We should just be platforming anybody if their content is good. So hopefully there could be some sort of exhibition or book tied together Vice's the Scots lead, which has everyone involved. But I think it's been a really exciting conversation to actually hae a blether wi you. I mean, you and I speak atween ourselves, but haeing you on the Hands Up for Trad wee gathering as part of the Scots Language Awards has been a total pleasure. Thank you so much for dealing with me and my scattiness. The day has been absolutely wonderful. You can actually ging back to the very beginning after this broadcast is finished, and you can watch it all back hour. So I'm going to say a huge thank you to Ashley Douglas. I knew. Unfortunately, Stuart Patterson will not be able to do his Patter Wee Patterson as he is unwell, which is a huge shame, but it will be rescheduled. A huge thanks to everybody that's watching, either live or they've gone back and watched it. You can vote in the Scots Language Awards until the morn. I'm not for sure if the morn is inclusive, but I know that the day is one of the last days that you can vote. Tickets are also available if you're wanting to ging at the Scots Language Awards held in Dundee on the 25th of September at the Gardyne Theatre. It's going to be an amazing night. It's going to be brilliant. Hearing that sort of community of practice come together is going to be sick, a special night. We had in 2019, 2020 was online, and 2021 is going to be a hybrid, so you can watch it online as well as in person if you can't get to Dundee. So I'm looking forward to that. Huge thanks to Hands Up for Trad for hosting this wee gathering the day. I think that's all that I'm going to say. Okay, bye.